Amanda Porter woke up to the cold, sterile walls of her cell. The ship's metallic hum echoed through the small, dimly lit chamber, the only sound that accompanied the constant pull of artificial gravity. It felt heavier today, the kind of pressure that sank into your bones, reminding you that escape wasn't an option. It had been 3 days since the hegemony captured her. 3 days since they dragged her from her ship, locked her in this isolated cell, and began their relentless attempts to break her spirit. The hegemony, a galaxy-spanning empire, had conquered 17 species, destroyed entire worlds, and yet they couldn't break a single human. The irony wasn't lost on Amanda. She had been trained for this. Years of military service, combat experience, and psychological conditioning had prepared her for torture, for pain, for isolation. But this was different. This wasn't about hurting her body. It was about breaking her mind. The cell door slid open with a hiss, and Amanda's eyes snapped to the entry. It was the same routine, the guards coming to check on her to see if she was still resistant, to remind her of how utterly helpless she was. But Amanda didn't flinch. She hadn't moved from her position, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hands resting calmly in her lap. A tall alien entered, his exoskeleton a shimmering, deep purple under the harsh lighting. He stood over her, casting a shadow that made the air feel thicker. This was Vexler, the hegemony commander tasked with overseeing her interrogation. He was the type who liked to look down on his prisoners, to use his size and strength as tools of psychological warfare. Amanda didn't react, didn't even acknowledge his presence. She had learned long ago that showing any weakness only invited more pain. Instead, she let him stare, her gaze unwavering, a silent challenge in her eyes. The silence stretched between them for several moments before Vexler spoke, his voice low and grating, amplified by his neural implant. "We are wasting time, human," Vexler said, his mandibles clicking in irritation. "The High Council demands results. Your resistance will cost you. They are growing impatient." Amanda finally met his gaze, her expression still neutral. "I don't care what your High Council wants," she replied calmly, her voice steady despite the stress of the past few days. "You won't break me." Vexler's eyes narrowed, but there was something different in his gaze now. He wasn't just angry, he was calculating. He had been expecting resistance. He had been expecting defiance. But the coldness in her eyes made him realize this wasn't a simple matter of a prisoner refusing to cooperate. Amanda Porter wasn't like the other prisoners he had broken in the past. Vexler took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're special, that you're different from all the others we've conquered. I've broken entire species with far less effort." Amanda remained silent, not reacting to his words. She didn't need to. She had already made up her mind about how this would end. With a flick of his taloned fingers, Vexler signaled the guards to bring in the neural disruptor. This was his go-to tool for forcing compliance. It didn't cause permanent damage, but it would make Amanda's brain fire with intense pain, pushing her into a state of confusion and submission. Amanda watched them bring it in, a sleek device about the size of her forearm. She had seen it before on others, prisoners who had buckled under its influence. It wasn't the first time she'd been subjected to such methods, but it was the first time she faced it without fear. The hegemony had no idea what they were dealing with. Vexler stepped back, signaling for the guards to activate the disruptor. The moment the device was powered on, Amanda felt a sharp twinge at the base of her skull, like someone driving a nail into her mind. It was excruciating, but she didn't scream. She didn't even wince. Her breathing slowed as she focused, digging deep within herself, pushing past the agony. Vexler watched, his anticipation turning to confusion. Why wasn't she reacting? The device was at full strength. Her neural activity should be spiraling into chaos by now. But Amanda held her ground, her eyes locked on Vexler's, her mind operating like a machine. She had trained herself to shut off the panic, the fear, the sensation of pain. It was the only way to survive. Minutes passed, long, agonizing minutes where Vexler's impatience grew with each second. Finally, when he could no longer hold back, he switched off the device. Amanda didn't even flinch. She remained seated, calm, steady as ever. Vexler's frustration was palpable. He slammed his fist against the doorframe, his claws scraping against the metal. "You think this is over? We have ways of breaking you. You will tell us what we need to know. The defense codes for Earth. Now." Amanda's lips curled into a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "I told you," she said softly, her voice full of quiet confidence. "You'll never break me, you're not even close." Vexler stood there, his mind racing, unable to comprehend what was happening. The humans had always been a puzzle, but this defiance, this unyielding spirit, was beyond anything he had expected. He had believed that time would weaken her resolve, but it hadn't. In fact, it seemed to be strengthening it. "We'll see about that," Vexler muttered. "You'll tell us what we need to know, human, one way or another." But Amanda wasn't worried. She knew what the next step was, she had anticipated it, and she was ready. Her silence was all the answer he needed. As Vexler turned to leave, his steps heavy with frustration, Amanda allowed herself a moment to relax. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to prepare for what was to come. There was still a long way to go, but Amanda Porter wasn't going to give up. Not ever. And the hegemony had no idea who they were dealing with. Vexler wasn't a patient being. His species had conquered entire civilizations with ruthless precision, and he had learned that weakness wasn't something to tolerate. He knew humans were resilient. He had heard the reports from his spies. But that didn't matter. He had his methods, and those methods had always worked. Still, Amanda Porter intrigued him. She was different, and that difference rattled him in a way he couldn't explain. His frustration grew with each passing day, every failed interrogation only adding fuel to the fire of his anger. If she hadn't given in by now, maybe it was time to escalate. The door to her cell slid open again, and this time it wasn't just Vexler who entered. Accompanying him was a taller, more imposing figure, someone Amanda hadn't seen before. His name was Rixor, a specialist in chemical interrogation. His six-fingered hands moved with practiced precision as he pushed a cart into the room, laden with vials of luminous, swirling liquids. Amanda glanced at the cart, then back at the two aliens. She felt the familiar weight of their eyes on her. Rixor was known for his ability to make even the most stubborn prisoner talk. This time, they were pulling out all the stops. Vexler didn't waste time with pleasantries. He marched toward Amanda and stood before her, his purple exoskeleton reflecting the harsh lights above. His voice was cold, devoid of any sympathy. "This is your last chance, human. Tell us the defense codes for Earth's orbital platforms. The hegemony demands it." Amanda sat perfectly still, her hands still resting in her lap, her expression unbothered. "No." The simplicity of her answer cut through the air like a blade. Vexler's mandibles clicked, his patience eroding with each second. "You are wasting both our time. I should have broken you by now. This will be your final test, Amanda Porter. You will submit." Rixor, who had been silently preparing his tools, stepped forward. He looked down at Amanda, his insectoid eyes blinking in unison as he spoke. "You have proven resilient, but that doesn't mean you are impervious. The chemicals we've prepared will break even the most hardened minds." Amanda raised an eyebrow, her voice dripping with a calm confidence. "Chemicals? You think you can break me with drugs? How quaint." Rixor's face twisted in irritation, but he said nothing. He simply moved to a console on the wall and began adjusting settings. His 6 hands worked with swift precision, each vial carefully selected, each compound carefully measured. Vexler stepped back, observing Amanda's still figure. His voice was almost a growl now. "You will learn, human. There are no limits to what we can do. No one is invincible, not even you." Amanda didn't respond. She simply watched as Rixor approached her with a syringe full of glowing blue liquid. It was the hegemony's finest truth serum, supposedly capable of forcing even the most secretive species to reveal their deepest thoughts. Rixor knelt down, holding the needle out to Amanda's neck. She didn't resist. The serum would work. That was what they believed. But Amanda wasn't afraid. She had prepared herself for this. She had already anticipated their next move. As the needle neared her skin, she spoke, her voice low but firm. "You're wasting your time." Vexler, who had been silent, stepped forward. "We'll see about that." With a sharp, clinical motion, Rixor jabbed the needle into Amanda's neck, releasing the serum into her bloodstream. At first, Amanda didn't react. The liquid burned as it coursed through her veins, but she kept her face neutral. She had been prepared for this. The serum would start working soon, forcing her to reveal Earth's secrets, but Amanda had a plan. For the first few moments, nothing happened. Then her pupils began to dilate and her breath quickened. Vexler took a step forward, watching her with intense interest. "Are you ready to speak now?" Vexler asked, his tone dripping with triumph. Amanda blinked rapidly, then slowly looked up at him. "You really think that's going to work?" she whispered. Vexler's expression faltered. "What do you mean?" Amanda's body suddenly stiffened, her posture changing in an instant. The effects of the serum weren't taking the way they had expected. Instead of succumbing to the paralysis, Amanda felt the energy coursing through her. The serum, designed to sedate and control, was instead acting as a stimulant, making her mind sharper, clearer, more focused. She stood up quickly, faster than Vexler and Rixor had anticipated. Before they could react, she grabbed the nearest object, one of the restraints they had used to tie her down earlier, and hurled it across the room. It clattered loudly against the metal walls, but the sound barely fazed her. "Is this all you've got?" Amanda taunted, her voice stronger than ever. "You want to know what makes humans different? It's that we don't break, we adapt." Vexler's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. Rixor, for the first time, seemed genuinely concerned. He quickly consulted his instruments, his multiple eyes darting between the readings. "The serum, it's not working the way it should. This is unprecedented." Amanda felt her strength growing with each passing second. She could feel the serum working against her, but she had learned to control it, bending its effects to her will. She took another step forward, her body humming with a surge of adrenaline. "Listen to me, you're not going to break me," Amanda said, her voice now full of confidence. "I don't care what you inject into me. I don't care what devices you throw at me. I'm not like the other species you've conquered. We're different. We're human." Vexler stepped back, his frustration evident. He had underestimated her. He had believed that his technology, his methods, would be enough to bring her to her knees. But now he realized the truth. Amanda Porter wasn't just any prisoner. She was the one who would show the hegemony that humans couldn't be conquered. With a hiss of hydraulics, the door to the cell slammed open and a team of soldiers poured in. They were heavily armed, their weapons raised, but Amanda didn't flinch. She was ready. She had been planning for this moment. Vexler's voice crackled in frustration. "This isn't over. We will break you, human. You will give us the codes." Amanda didn't reply. Instead, she calmly reached for a console on the wall and began typing rapidly, her mind racing. The hegemony thought they were in control, but they were wrong. In that moment, Amanda knew what had to be done. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Earth, and Earth's fate depended on her next move. The atmosphere in the cell had shifted. Vexler and Rixor stood at the door, watching Amanda with an expression that blended frustration with the dawning recognition of something far more dangerous. Amanda Porter, who had been nothing but a prisoner to them, was now a threat they hadn't anticipated. Vexler's voice cut through the tension, his tone colder than before. "You're delusional, human. You think you can outsmart us. You think your feeble resistance will stop the hegemony." Amanda didn't answer right away. Instead, she focused on the console in front of her, her fingers flying across the keys. Her mind was a machine, processing data faster than Vexler could fathom. She had already breached their systems. The hegemony had underestimated humanity's adaptability, and now they were about to see the consequences. In the corner of the room, Rixor was fumbling with his instruments, still baffled by the unexpected effects of the serum. His multiple eyes blinked rapidly, his 6 fingers tapping at the data pad in panic. "It's not possible," Rixor muttered. "The serum was designed for complete neurological control. It was supposed to incapacitate her, but instead she's enhanced." Vexler, unable to hide his frustration any longer, stepped forward, his body towering over Amanda. "Enough games," he growled. "Tell me the defense codes for Earth's orbital platforms, or I will have you tortured in ways you can't even begin to imagine." Amanda slowly looked up at him, her expression calm and unafraid. "I already told you, there are no defense codes." For a moment, Vexler's mind didn't register the weight of her words. He had expected resistance, defiance, but this was something different. No defense codes, it didn't make sense. The hegemony's spies had provided them with detailed intelligence. Earth was supposed to be defenseless, a target ripe for the taking. Vexler's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, Earth's defenses?" "There are no orbital platforms," Amanda interrupted. Her voice was steady, as if she were explaining something as simple as the weather. "Earth barely even has a permanent moon base. Your spies were watching the wrong footage. What you think you know about Earth is 70 years out of date." The words hit Vexler like a strike to the chest. He stood frozen for a moment, the realization dawning on him slowly. Earth wasn't the weak, defenseless world he had been led to believe. It wasn't vulnerable. It was playing a different game. a game that the hegemony had no knowledge of, no way to predict. "You're lying," Vexler spat, though doubt crept into his voice. "How could we have missed something so?" "No," Amanda interrupted again, her voice sharp and filled with certainty. "It's not that you missed it. It's that you never bothered to look. You thought you had it all figured out, didn't you? You thought you knew humanity, knew our weaknesses, our fears, but you're wrong." Her words rang in the cold air of the room, and for the first time, Amanda saw a flicker of something like uncertainty in Vexler's expression. He had always believed the hegemony's superiority was absolute, that it was a given. He had never considered the possibility that he had miscalculated this badly. Amanda stood up, her posture now filled with purpose. "The hegemony isn't dealing with a primitive species. We're not some random colony for you to conquer. We've known about you for decades, and we've been preparing." Rixor's multiple eyes widened as the implications of her words began to sink in. "You've been preparing for us?" he asked, incredulous. "How?" Amanda's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "By playing your game. We let you think we were ignorant, that we didn't know what you were planning. We even fed your intelligence systems with exactly what you wanted. But we've been building something far more dangerous than anything your fleet could ever muster. We've been building alliances. We've been building our own strength." Vexler stepped back, his mind racing to make sense of what Amanda was saying. He could feel his confidence beginning to erode. The hegemony's intelligence was unmatched, their military might unrivaled, but it was based on outdated information. Earth had adapted, outgrown the role of a helpless species, and now it was ready to fight back. "What do you want, then?" Vexler demanded, his voice tense. "If you don't have the codes, what are you playing at?" Amanda paused for a moment, her gaze steady and unflinching. "What I want is simple. I want you to know that Earth is not what you think it is. We have something that you can't defeat with force. You'll never break us, Vexler. You'll never control us. And when your fleet arrives, you'll learn that we've already prepared for your invasion. You've walked right into a trap." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of their meaning. Vexler's mind raced, processing everything Amanda had said. He had underestimated humanity. His neural implant buzzed with signals of frustration and disbelief. Earth, a planet that should have been an easy target, was now the centerpiece of a galactic trap. The hegemony was about to be caught in a net they couldn't see. He opened his mouth to speak, but Amanda cut him off once more. "The Arcturian Alliance is already waiting for you," she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet certainty. "They've known about your plans for years. They've been waiting for you to make this mistake, and now your fleet is walking straight into their trap." Vexler's mandibles clicked in anger. "You're lying. The Arcturians would never." "They would," Amanda interrupted. "They've been allies with Earth for decades, though you never knew it. You never bothered to learn about the true state of the galaxy, about the alliances we've been forging in secret. You've made a grave mistake, Vexler, and now it's too late." As the weight of her words settled on the room, Vexler stood in stunned silence. Rixor, who had been quiet up until this point, now stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you telling me," Rixor asked, "that Earth has had the ability to fight back this entire time, that we've been wrong about everything?" Amanda met his gaze, her expression a mix of empathy and resolve. "Yes, you've been wrong, but that's the nature of underestimating humanity. We're capable of more than you ever imagined." Vexler clenched his fists, his frustration bubbling over. His pride, his arrogance had brought him to this point. He had believed that the hegemony's power would be enough to crush any resistance, and yet here he was, standing in a cell with a human who had turned the tables on him. Amanda's voice broke through his thoughts. "Your invasion fleet is already on its way, and when they arrive, they won't find the easy conquest they expected. They'll find something far worse. A united front, an army ready to fight, and an entire planet prepared for war." The room fell silent. Vexler stood there, his mind processing the implications of her words, his grip on his authority slipping with every passing second. He had made a grave mistake. Amanda smiled, a small, knowing smile. "And now," she said softly, "the real game begins." The silence in the room was deafening. Vexler stood motionless, staring at Amanda, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and growing frustration. How had they missed this? How had the hegemony, who had prided itself on its intelligence network, its power, and its technological superiority, been so wrong about Earth? Amanda stood in front of him, unbroken, still poised and calm, as if the entire galaxy could be upended and she wouldn't even flinch. Her expression was one of quiet resolve, a stark contrast to the internal turmoil that Vexler was now battling. "You have no idea what you've done," Vexler said through clenched teeth, his voice tight with anger. "The hegemony does not fail. We will destroy your world. You will regret this." Amanda didn't even flinch. "You keep saying that, but I think it's you who are going to regret it, Vexler, because the truth is you never understood humans. You never understood us at all." Rixor, still staring at his monitors, looked between Vexler and Amanda, his many eyes blinking in quick succession. The situation was spiraling out of his control, and he didn't know how to stop it. His training told him to remain calm, to keep working, but the magnitude of Amanda's words was beginning to shake his scientific confidence. "The defense codes, where are they?" Vexler asked, now speaking with forced composure. "Tell me now, or I will personally see to it that your suffering will be unlike anything you can imagine." Amanda didn't answer. Instead, she stood up straighter, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "You're wasting your time. You don't need the codes. You never did. Earth doesn't need them." Vexler's patience was beginning to erode, his frustration bubbling over once more. "I won't ask again. I will make you talk. You will regret defying the hegemony." Amanda's voice was cold and controlled, cutting through the tension in the room. "I already told you. You're not dealing with a primitive species. You don't break us. You never will." The words hit Vexler like a punch to the gut. He had never known a species to resist like this, to defy the hegemony's methods with such ease. This human, this Amanda Porter, was the embodiment of everything the hegemony had underestimated about Earth. As Vexler took a step back, his mind racing, Amanda's eyes flicked toward the security panel in the corner. She could feel the ship systems, feel the pulse of the data streaming through their networks. It was almost too easy now, too simple to manipulate the ship's command structure. She had already hijacked their communication system. She had already locked them out of the control room. And now she was ready to make her move. "Rixor," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "You can stop this now. You don't have to follow Vexler's orders. You don't have to help them anymore." Rixor looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, confusion washing over his insectoid face. Amanda stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his. "You know how the hegemony works. You know how they control you. You've been a pawn in their game for so long, Rixor. But now you have a chance to choose. You can either help them continue this massacre or you can help us stop it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rixor stood motionless, his many eyes flicking to Vexler, who was staring at Amanda in shock and disbelief. For the first time, Rixor felt something stir within him, a flicker of doubt. I don't," Rixor stammered, clearly torn. "I've followed the hegemony's orders my whole life. I don't know what to do." Amanda's voice softened, her tone filled with a surprising compassion. "You can do what's right. You can choose to stop being a tool for an empire that doesn't care about you. Don't let them control you any longer." Vexler's voice suddenly cut through the conversation, sharp and commanding. "Don't listen to her, Rixor. She's lying to you. The hegemony will prevail. We always do." But Rixor didn't respond. His 6 fingers trembled as he glanced back and forth between Vexler and Amanda, his mind racing. He had always believed that following the hegemony was his only option, his only path to power and stability. But Amanda's words, the possibility of something more, something better, had started to make sense in a way he hadn't anticipated. Vexler stepped forward, his eyes now filled with rage. "You don't have a choice. This ends now." He turned to the guards, signaling them to bring the neural disruptor back online. "We'll see how long you last this time, human." Amanda smiled, but this time it wasn't with amusement. It was with something far colder. "You're too late." Before Vexler could react, the ship shook violently, the lights flickering overhead. It wasn't the usual shudder of the engine. This felt different, more deliberate, more controlled. Rixor looked at the monitors, his eyes widening as he processed the information. "The ship," he began, but Vexler cut him off, his voice rising in panic. "What have you done?" Amanda didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped toward the panel, her fingers flying across the console. She had already hijacked the ship systems. She had already set everything into motion. Now it was time to let the truth unfold. "This ship is already on a timer," Amanda said, her voice steady. "The moment your fleet arrives, your invasion will be over. The Arcturian Alliance is already moving in position, and you won't even know what hit you. Your fleet will be destroyed before you even reach Earth. Vexler froze, his mind racing. What do you mean, how could you have? You really don't understand humans, do you? Amanda said, her voice low but filled with conviction. You thought you could conquer us, break us, but we've been building something more powerful than any weapon. We've been building alliances, and now it's too late for you. Rixor stepped back, his mind reeling. The realization was hitting him like a tidal wave. Earth was not the weakling they had believed it to be. It had been playing the long game, and now the hegemony's empire was crumbling from the inside out. The Arcturians, Rixor whispered, they've been preparing this entire time. Amanda nodded slowly, her expression unwavering. Exactly, the trap is set, and when your fleet arrives, it will be greeted by an army you never saw coming. Vexler's face turned pale, the weight of the situation finally settling in. His neural implant, which had been flashing red in frustration, now shifted to a dull amber, indicating a level of cognitive distress. He had failed. The hegemony had failed. Your fleet is going to walk right into a slaughter, Amanda continued, her words cutting through the tension. And all of this, all of your efforts, will be for nothing. Vexler turned to the guards, his voice trembling with fury. Seal the ship, lock everything down, we can't let them. But before he could finish, the ship shuddered again, this time with greater force. The emergency lights flickered on, and a series of alarms blared throughout the vessel. The hegemony's control over their ship was slipping away. Amanda glanced over her shoulder at Rixor, who was now standing, completely stunned. It's over, she said softly. You've lost. The ship's emergency lights flickered above, casting long shadows across the room as the alarms blared louder. The sound of metal groaning echoed through the halls of the vessel as the artificial gravity fluctuated. It was as if the entire ship was coming apart, fighting against the inevitable. Vexler's face twisted with rage and disbelief. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening. The hegemony's perfect system was unraveling right in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Amanda Porter, this single human, had outwitted him, outmaneuvered the entire empire. She had turned their own technology and tactics against them, and now, with the Arcturian alliance closing in, their fate was sealed. Shut this down, Vexler roared, his voice cracking with desperation. Seal all docking bays, activate security protocols, lock everything down. We cannot let her escape. But his orders were falling on deaf ears. The ship was already beyond his control. Amanda, still standing with a cool confidence in the center of the room, let out a soft, almost satisfied chuckle. She knew the next phase was coming. The hegemony had no idea what was about to hit them. Not so fast, Commander, she said calmly. You're not in charge here anymore. She walked toward the nearest console, her fingers dancing over the keys. In an instant, the doors to her cell slid open with a metallic hiss. Then, with a flick of her wrist, the lockdown protocols began to fail. The force fields in the ship's corridors powered down. Security systems deactivated one by one. She was in control now. Vexler's eyes widened with panic. You've unlocked everything, he said through gritted teeth. You've ruined everything. Amanda turned to him slowly, her eyes cold, sharp. No, you did that. You've underestimated Earth, underestimated me. Now your precious empire is falling apart, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. She looked over at Rixor, who was still standing near the panel, clearly overwhelmed. His insectoid face was drawn with confusion and fear. The hegemony had believed they were infallible, that they could control everything. But this human, Amanda, had proven them wrong. Amanda, Rixor said, his voice shaky. What do you want from me? I can't help you anymore. The ship's systems are. You can help by staying out of my way, she interrupted, her tone surprisingly gentle. She turned to face him, her eyes piercing. You have a choice now, Rixor. You can either help us or stay with him, she gestured at Vexler. But I'm not forcing you. The decision is yours. Rixor stood in silence for a moment, clearly torn. He had never questioned his loyalty to the hegemony, but now everything was different. He could feel it. The weight of Amanda's words lingered in the air, a choice he had never thought he would be forced to make. Behind them, Vexler was packing, his mandibles clicking in frustration. Don't listen to her, Rixor. She's lying. The hegemony will crush Earth. You're a fool if you think this human can do anything. But Rixor didn't listen. Instead, he took a tentative step forward, his eyes meeting Amanda's with a sense of quiet resolve. I'm done, he said, his voice steady now. I've seen enough, you were right, I can't keep following them. Amanda gave him a nod, an acknowledgement of the hard choice he had made. You made the right decision. Vexler turned to Rixor, his face contorted with disbelief. You dare betray the hegemony, you will pay for this. You're both traitors now. But Rixor's eyes never wavered. No, Vexler, the hegemony is done, and it's time to face the truth. The ship shook again, this time more violently. It wasn't just a mechanical issue, it was a signal. The Arcturian Alliance was making their move. Amanda glanced at the countdown on her wrist. The trap was closing in and the Arcturian ships were almost within range. The final phase was about to begin, but there was one last thing she needed to do. She walked toward the communications panel and activated the ship's broadcast system. The voice that came through was calm, almost casual, but there was an undeniable authority in it. This is Amanda Porter, she said into the microphone, her voice carrying through the ship systems. To every ship in the hegemony's fleet currently orbiting Earth, your mission is over. Surrender now or face the consequences. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Vexler, now completely enraged, lunged toward her, but Amanda was already steps ahead. She had already locked the ship systems, securing her escape route. You won't get away with this, Vexler hissed, his voice low and dangerous. Amanda smiled, her eyes gleaming with a quiet confidence. You're wrong, Vexler, I already have. She turned and motioned for Rixor to follow her as she made her way toward the escape pods. The corridors were eerily quiet now, the crew members scrambling to regain control, but it was too late. Amanda had already taken over. With every step, the feeling of liberation grew. She wasn't just running away, she was taking control of her destiny, of Earth's future. The hegemony had no idea what they had just set into motion, and now it was time to face the consequences. As Amanda and Rixor entered the escape pod, she glanced back at the ship that had once held her captive. It was no longer the prison it had been. Now, it was a symbol of her victory. The pod detached with a sudden jolt, and as it glided away from the doomed vessel, Amanda allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. She had done it. She had outsmarted the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The Arcturian fleet was already in position, ready to take down the hegemony. Earth's defenses were already in place. The war was over before it had even begun. But even as she looked out at the vast emptiness of space, Amanda knew that this was only the beginning. The real battle, the fight for humanity's place in the galaxy, was only starting. And she, Amanda Porter, was ready to lead it. The escape pod rocketed through the darkness of space, a small speck against the backdrop of distant stars. Amanda Porter sat in the pod's cockpit, her fingers gently tapping the console in front of her, her mind already working ahead. Rixor, seated beside her, was quiet, his expression unreadable. He had been through a whirlwind of emotions in the last few hours, betrayal, fear, uncertainty. But now, as they drifted away from the hegemony ship, there was only a creeping sense of awe. They had done it, they had broken free. Amanda leaned back in her seat and let out a long breath, the adrenaline of their escape slowly ebbing away. The pod's internal lights flickered slightly, a reminder of the chaos still unfolding behind them. Are you okay? She asked Rixor, her voice breaking the silence. Rixor turned to look at her, his many eyes blinking in quick succession. I don't know. I've never been in a situation like this. I spent my entire life following the hegemony's commands, never questioning anything. And now everything is different. His voice faltered for a moment, the weight of his actions catching up to him. Amanda smiled softly. It's okay to be confused. It's normal. What you're feeling, doubt, uncertainty, it's all part of the process. You've made a choice, Rixor, and that's something not many people can say. Rixor didn't reply, but his posture relaxed ever so slightly. The weight of the decision he had made, defecting from the hegemony, choosing a side that would put him against everything he had known, still hung heavily on him. But Amanda's words seemed to be the lifeline he needed. We're going to be fine, Amanda said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence that reassured Rixor. The pod continued to drift, and Amanda turned her attention to the data feed flashing on the screen. The Arcturian fleet was moving into position, ready to confront the hegemony head-on. The timing was crucial. The element of surprise was on their side. The hegemony, expecting an easy conquest of Earth, had already begun their march toward an ambush they didn't even know existed. The countdown had begun. The first wave of Arcturian ships would strike soon, and Amanda's role in this battle was far from over. She was no longer just a prisoner, she was the key to Earth's survival. The fate of billions now rested in her hands, and she couldn't afford to hesitate. Minutes later, the pod passed through the debris field surrounding the Hegemony's main vessel. The once imposing warship now looked small in comparison to the massive Arcturian fleet that loomed in the distance. Amanda's heart raced as the scope of the battle ahead began to fully take form. "This is it," she said under her breath, staring at the approaching fleet. She activated the pod's communication system and sent a direct transmission to the Arcturian flagship. "This is Amanda Porter. I'm aboard. I'm ready for the next phase." A calm voice responded almost instantly. "Acknowledged, Commander Porter. Proceed to the designated rendezvous point. Our forces are in position. The Hegemony will not escape this time." Amanda took a deep breath and tightened her grip on the controls. This wasn't just a military operation, it was a message. A message to the Hegemony, to the galaxy, that humanity wasn't to be underestimated. Earth would no longer be the pawn, it would be the king. As the pod made its way toward the Arcturian flagship, Amanda's mind began to churn with strategies. She could already see how the battle would unfold. The first wave of Arcturian ships would disable the Hegemony fleet's power systems, rendering their massive warships useless. The Hegemony had always relied on brute force, but this time it wouldn't be enough. It would be humanity's ingenuity, its adaptability, that would win the day. Behind her, the Hegemony fleet loomed like a gathering storm. But Amanda knew they were in for a rude awakening. Earth's strength wasn't in its military technology, it was in its people. Its adaptability, its ability to rise from the ashes and fight for survival. And she, Amanda Porter, would lead them to victory. The escape pod docked with the Arcturian flagship, its hatch opening with a soft hiss. Amanda stepped out, her boots clicking against the metal floor. Rixor followed closely behind, his 6 arms folding in front of him in a posture of respect, though his mind was still reeling from the enormity of what they were about to do. They were met by Captain Decker, the human leader of the fleet. His grizzled face softened when he saw Amanda, a brief flicker of relief passing through his eyes. "Amanda," he said, his voice low but filled with gratitude. "Glad you made it. We've got a long road ahead of us." "I'm ready," Amanda replied, her voice steady and determined. "Where do we stand?" Decker led her to a central command station, where a holographic map of the galaxy was displayed. Several Arcturian officers were gathered around, analyzing the movements of the Hegemony fleet. "The first wave is already in motion," Decker said. "We're shutting down their power grids as we speak, but they're not going to go down without a fight. We'll need everything you've got, Amanda." Amanda nodded, her mind already calculating the next move. She had studied the Hegemony's tactics for years, how they relied on overwhelming force, how they depended on their advanced technology to crush their enemies. But they had never faced humanity. They had never faced her. "Let's give them a show they won't forget," Amanda said, her eyes narrowing. "We're not just going to win this fight, we're going to change the galaxy." Meanwhile, in the heart of the Hegemony fleet, Vexler paced frantically through the command room. His mind raced with the realization that everything was falling apart. The power grid was failing. His ships were losing their energy reserves faster than they could react. And worst of all, he had no idea what had happened to the control of his ship. It was as though his entire command structure had been taken over. "How is this possible?" he muttered to himself, his voice tinged with panic. "We were supposed to crush them." But it wasn't just the systems that were failing. It was the mind behind them. The Hegemony had failed to adapt. It had failed to see what was coming. "Commander Vexler," one of his officers called, their voice tense. "The Arcturian fleet is engaged. We're being overwhelmed." Vexler froze. "Overwhelmed?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Impossible. We have more ships, more firepower." But the truth was already staring him in the face. The Hegemony was outmatched. Their brute force wasn't enough this time. They had underestimated humanity. Amanda stood at the command station, watching the unfolding battle. The first wave of Arcturian ships had successfully disabled the Hegemony's power systems, leaving their fleet stranded in space, vulnerable and exposed. The next phase of the plan was already in motion. The Arcturian forces were moving in for the final strike. Vexler had made a fatal mistake. He had assumed that Earth was weak, that humanity was just another species to be conquered. But he hadn't counted on Amanda Porter. He hadn't counted on the strength of the human spirit. "This is it," Amanda said, her voice quiet but filled with resolve. "It's time to finish this." As the Arcturian ships closed in for the kill, Amanda couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just a victory for Earth. It was a victory for all the species who had suffered under the hegemony's oppressive rule. Humanity had fought back. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly unstoppable. And as the hegemony's fleet crumbled before them, Amanda knew one thing for sure. The galaxy would never be the same again. The atmosphere aboard the Arcturian flagship was tense, yet there was a sense of quiet anticipation. The hegemony's fleet, once so mighty and seemingly invincible, was now a powerless collection of drifting vessels, completely paralyzed by the precision of the Arcturian forces. Amanda Porter stood in the heart of the command room, staring at the live holofeed of the battle unfolding. The once dominant empire was crumbling, and it was because of her, because of humanity's ingenuity. "Commander Porter," Captain Decker said, his voice steady but filled with awe, "this is your moment. The hegemony is finished. The rest of the galaxy will see that Earth isn't the weak, defenseless world they once thought it was." Amanda nodded slowly, her mind still racing. It was almost surreal. The hegemony had been the ultimate force in the galaxy, but they had failed to anticipate one thing: humanity's ability to adapt, to outthink their oppressors. They had underestimated her. Vexler's fleet was already in disarray, unable to respond. The Arcturian ships were now surrounding the hegemony vessels, cutting off their last escape routes. The mighty warships, once a symbol of fear and dominance, were now completely incapacitated. Amanda couldn't help but feel a small, triumphant smile tug at her lips. "This is just the beginning," she murmured to herself, her voice barely a whisper. She turned to Decker. "We can't stop now. This victory doesn't mean anything if we don't make sure the hegemony never rises again." Decker's gaze met hers, and for the first time, Amanda saw a look of true admiration in his eyes. "You're right. We can't afford to let them regroup. We have to make sure they're finished. For good." Amanda's eyes flicked to the main holo display, where Vexler's command ship was now surrounded by Arcturian and human forces. The final phase of their plan had begun. The end of Vexler. On board the hegemony command ship, Vexler paced in circles, his claws scraping against the floor in frustration. His once-proud fleet, the cornerstone of the hegemony's power, was helpless against the combined might of the Arcturian alliance and humanity. He had failed. He had underestimated everything, especially Amanda Porter. The ship's communications console flickered, then buzzed to life with a soft beep. Vexler's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to hear it, but he knew he had no choice. "Commander Vexler," a cold voice came through the speaker. It was Amanda's voice, calm and commanding. Vexler's mandibles clicked together in a sharp, angry motion. "What do you want, human?" he spat. "I want you to understand that your time is up," Amanda replied, her voice steady. "This is the end of your empire. You thought you could break us. You thought you could take what wasn't yours, but you failed." Vexler roared in fury, his body bristling with anger. "You think this is over? You think this is a victory? The hegemony does not fall. We will rebuild. We." "No," Amanda interrupted, her voice unwavering. "You won't." The words hung in the air, the finality in her tone unmistakable. Vexler stood frozen as Amanda's final command was transmitted across the network. The once powerful hegemony fleet was systematically disabled, with their weapons and shields disabled by the Arcturian blockade. The hegemony's power was crumbling, and Vexler could do nothing to stop it. The surrender. As Vexler's rage simmered, Rixor, his former ally, walked into the room, his body posture different now. There was no longer any sign of loyalty to the hegemony in his eyes. He had defected. He had seen the truth, and now he was one of them. Rixor's voice was quiet as he approached Vexler, his many eyes studying him with a sense of sadness. "It's over, Vexler. You were wrong. You've been wrong all along." Vexler's eyes narrowed as he looked at Rixor. "You too, you've abandoned the hegemony." Rixor stood tall, his 6 arms folded in front of him. "I've chosen to live, Vexler, something you've forgotten." Vexler's eyes flashed with anger, but deep down he knew Rixor was right. His empire was broken. His race had failed to adapt, and now they would be forced to face the consequences of their arrogance. "Do you want to continue fighting this pointless battle?" Rixor asked softly. "The galaxy is changing. The hegemony is finished." Vexler's shoulders slumped, and for the first time he let out a bitter sigh. "You're right, it's over." He stood in silence for a moment, then, almost reluctantly, he turned to Rixor. "I surrender." The words felt like poison on his tongue, but Vexler knew there was no other choice. His power was shattered. His fleet was gone. The galaxy had turned against him. He had no hope left. Rixor nodded solemnly. "You've made the right choice." The aftermath. As the hegemony's vessels drifted in space, powerless and crippled, Amanda stood on the bridge of the Arcturian flagship, looking out at the remains of the battle. The once terrifying fleet was now nothing more than a collection of disabled ships. The Arcturians had done their part. Now it was time for humanity to take charge. Captain Decker joined Amanda on the bridge, his expression grim but resolute. "We've done it. The hegemony's power is gone." Amanda nodded, her eyes never leaving the viewport. "We've won this battle, but the war is far from over. We need to rebuild. We need to show the galaxy that Earth is not to be underestimated." Decker placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined, Amanda. Earth is in your debt." Amanda turned to him, her eyes sharp and focused. "This isn't just about Earth. It's about the entire galaxy. We have the power to change things now. We need to lead, not conquer." Decker nodded, his face softening slightly. "You're right, this is just the beginning." A new era. As the Arcturian fleet moved to escort the hegemony's surviving ships to neutral space, Amanda felt a sense of pride swell within her. Earth had not only survived, it had triumphed. Against all odds, humanity had defeated an empire that had once seemed invincible. And with that victory came a new responsibility. The galaxy was changing, and Earth would be at the forefront of that change. Amanda Porter, once a prisoner, was now a leader, a symbol of humanity's strength, adaptability, and resilience. The hegemony had underestimated her, and now the entire galaxy would see that Earth was not just a player, it was a force to be reckoned with. As she looked out at the stars, Amanda knew that the future was uncertain. But for the first time in history, humanity stood with the power to shape that future. And they would do so with honor, compassion, and strength, qualities that had always been their true weapons. Amanda Porter had led Earth to victory, and now she would lead humanity into a new era.